Like so many things in life, music is the language of inspiration, and we speak it on all sides of the experience. People are inspired to write songs, a performance can be inspired, someone's music is inspiring. Yet the sources of inspiration can be as numerous and varied as those they affect. This is a story about the kind of thing that gets my nanny goat, the inanimate graciously imbued with life. Sometimes something is more than something, or at least it becomes that way when it collides with humanity. So it is with the guitar I call Paul Purk. Now, I never knew the man, but I know his son, and I know his guitar. So I guess that's something. Maybe the next best thing.
Paul Purk was my dad. He was also my mom's husband, Dorothy. And he was born on March the 5th in 1923, which would make him 100. He spent most of his time wanting to be engaged in labor. Even though he was very intelligent, he didn't give two hoops and a holler for any kind of formal education. And so by the time he was in the 9th grade up in Piqua at the high school, he dropped out. But from that time on, being 14 years old in 1937, 38, long in there, he did any kind of menial or hard labor he could possibly do to turn a buck. And then, of course, he got drafted, and he went and served in the Philippines. And because of his expert driving ability, he was able to be a Jeep driver for a lieutenant, and that got him out of a lot of stuff. He also, prior to that, though, he also drove big trucks and worked with some heavy equipment. Came back and was a truck driver, did several different things, got into the thing of masonry, and in 67 or 68 he joined the laborers, the Masons Union, and he went automatically from $4 to $8. So the family was in hog heaven after that. He did masonry, and he worked for the Peterson Construction Company for the most part out of Wapak until his passing in 1981. I'm sorry to say he was 58 years of age. When the bug hit us to really start tinkering with instruments, I had already learned to play fairly well. My mom and dad were just starting to pick it up, and by chance, the music store where I took lessons was in a big complex where there were several office buildings, et cetera, and I noticed there was this kind of old green chipboard case that was in the basement, because I would go to the basement a lot of the times, and so one day I told Dad, I said, I think there's something old down there, and I don't know what it's about exactly. And he said, why don't you ask Mr. Gentner? So we asked Mr. Gentner, and he says, I don't think you'd want that. He said, that's an old beat up Gibson guitar. It doesn't even have a nut on it. And my dad said, well, what would you take for it? And Gene said, well, I think $65 would be a reasonable price for it, knowing that a new one was probably about maybe $290 to $350 right in there. And this one already had age on it. And when I popped the top on the case the first time I saw it, was one of those guitars that looked exactly like the one Hank Williams played when he played on the Opry when he wasn't using a Martin. So, yep, that's how we got it, $65. Dad came home, took a comb from the grocery store. We used to get them in packets, and there was usually this one big one. Well, he took the biggest one, and he made a nut out of it. And it played like that for several years until I finally had somebody fix it pretty right for him.
I'm not trying to be overly precious here, but I do think people and their instruments make each other over in their image, at least to some extent. A musician chooses a guitar for whatever reason, but the guitar has some say in the path they'll walk, or at very least how they'll walk it. And along the way, the musician makes certain demands of their instrument, and generally speaking, the instrument obliges. And so they work with and against each other until it's hard to really know one without getting to know the other.
The truss rod cover, I have to admit, was put on afterwards, and I did that in honor of him. And of course, in that little ticker tape, sticker tape, whatever, that was his original signature on that. And also, I don't know if I ever told you this story or not, but I came home one time and I found him out in the garage. And he was his usual state when he had to do finish work, because he hated finish work. He didn't like that. But anyway, he put 2 stove bolts down through the bridge so it would never come up. So that was kind of his signature thing. And then he was forever looking for markers. He called them marking pencils. It was just markers is all they were, but he called them marking pencils. And he would try to go around the sound hole, and he would try to blend in different colors to get that Gibson to come back to what it used to be. One of the most vivid memories I have of him is centers around that garage, because that was his pride and joy. He had built a second garage on the property, and he put a stove in it, and he and his friends, either the fox hunting friends or maybe even some of his bricklaying friends, would roast hot dogs and sit out there and play the guitar. I also know that we had a lot of people who invited us to come to their homes, and we would play. And I came home one day after school, and he was sitting out in the garage, and he was playing these 3 chords, and it was probably like standard 12-bar blues, what we would call that. It didn't have anything of great significance, but he said, "I want you to play some lead guitar behind this," and it was just 3 chords, but we just had a very enjoyable time doing that. Always had to do "You Are My Sunshine," "If I Could Hear My Mother Pray Again." He liked to do Haggard. He was a big Haggard fan, and he also liked people like Roy Drusky, Hank Lachlan, "Send Me the Pillow That You Dream On," and he'd always get kind of emotional when he would do the gospel songs, but those were some of his favorites.
Nowadays, people call guitars like this vintage. They use words like character and mojo as descriptors and evidence, pointing to the superiority of more experienced instruments, not to mention the hefty prices they can sometimes fetch. And so the guitar world is flush with naysayers who are quick to point out the flawed logic in idealizing such imperfect and inconsistent tools. Like logic is the prevailing factor in how we experience music on a gut level. No one has ever reasoned their way into inspiration, and if music is about inspiration, then inspiration is about connection.
You know, there was a point in time when I didn't think he would probably ever part with that guitar. And then somebody by chance threw a brick through the window of our music store in Shepherd's Music in Southern Piqua there, and they had a Sigma. And of course, needless to say, it looked like a Martin. And he went and bought this Sigma guitar, and it just had one little flaw on it. And he kind of gave me the Gibson to play. The Gibson had to survive a camping trip that some of the boys and I took, and I sat on it, and it went like that for probably, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 years before we actually got it properly cleated and fixed. I just always felt closer to him when I played that guitar. It just, that just gives you all kinds of good memories, and makes me smile today when I think about it.
Paul Purk passed away before I was born, but I've known Bill since I was about 15 years old. He dragged me all over the state playing music, and has been a formative figure for me in many ways. He'd always say, "You know what my dad would say," and then he'll follow it up with some colorful quip that described how he was feeling about what was going on at that moment. In all the hours and miles that I've logged with Bill, he taught me so much about being a musician. He taught me so much about being a performer, but mostly he just became one of my best friends. Now, with regards to his dad's guitar, the one we call Paul Purk, I think it stands on its own merits as a great old box. But I think if you leave it there, you sell it a little bit short. I see it as a line that connects 3 points. And even though relationships are ultimately what matters the most, I think that having something in common can sometimes help bridge the divide. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I love old guitars. I love the way they look, I love the way they smell, I love the way they feel, how they sound. But there's more to it than that. I love how they help connect us. To the past? Yes, but mainly to each other. In some ways, they're our teachers. Perhaps not in the literal sense, there are real people for that. But sometimes something truly does become more than something, and it derives its meaning from relationship, from humanity, and so the inanimate takes on new life. And when life's experiences are shared, we call that connection. To me, it's inspiration.
Takes a worried man, sing a worried song. Takes a worried man, sing a worried song. Takes a worried man, sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried long. I went down to the river, I laid down to sleep. I went down to the river and I laid down to sleep. I went down to the river and I lay down to sleep. When I woke up, I had shackles on my feet. Takes a worried man to sing a worried song. Takes a worried man to sing a worried song. Takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I won't be worried long. I'm worried now, but I won't be